wanted to tell you a little bit about the story of what's going on here today from a personal perspective. Susan and I live in Topanga Canyon, as does my partner, Rich. And last spring, we had a frustrating situation happen because for months and months and months, we couldn't drive out of the canyon towards the PCH because of landslide flow. And I was super frustrated, as was a lot of people. And then one day, I recognized from my study of the ecological inheritance of this land that in fact landslides are necessary for abundance here. So normally what happens when it rains is that water will get under the crest of the mountain and flush out the little streams and rivers that move under the ground and resource the coastal oaks and resource the other kinds of plants and seeds that live there. And then when you go through a drought and then you get rain again, the soil underneath the ground can be pretty dry, and that rush of river water can cut at the root system of trees and even move boulders, and then you get a landslide. And when a landslide happens, it sloughs off the top part of its skin and it moves downward to the bottom of a canyon. And in a place like Topanga, that's where the creek would also move and move all of that delicious material, all of that duff and dander and tree parts and roots and seeds and mycelium and bacteria and yeast to the lowest point where it would then get water and things would germinate. So at the very base of Topanga, when you're on the coast, you would also likely get an estuary or a lagoon, which is like where two ecozones meet, the ecozone of the ocean and the ecozone of the mountains. And this is a place of amazing importance because those are two of our defense lines for cleansing. It cleanses any impurities out of the soil, and it cleanses any impurities out of the sea, and creates the context for amazing abundance. So for very long periods of time before LA was the city it is, it was a very sacred site, the Topanga Lagoon, for indigenous people and for wildlife to come because of that abundance. So what happens when you build your highways on these places is that we're competing for mobility. The soil wants to go to the lowest point, but that's where our roads are. And so usually what happens is that we clear the roads as fast as we can so that we can use them again. And that works really well. We've done a really good job considering we built our highway, Route 1, on a massive landslide area. Like this, there's constantly roads, and a lot of our most valuable properties throughout the LA basins are in the foothills. So all of those foothills also have landslides. And that's before you get to the Roll of Fire, which loves those same streams and riverbeds because that's where wild grasses will grow. So this is a long way of saying that when I realized that that landslide debris was going to be moved and that we were already paying to move it by paying our taxes, right? So when we pay our taxes, we're paying Caltrans, which is a state agency, to make sure we can use our roads. So when you get a landslide, Caltrans then says, okay, trucking company, why don't y'all bid on this job, right? And they choose the best bid. Now, this is where it gets complicated. How does a trucking company know what it's going to take to move a landslide that's so big that it could take several months to figure out where to take it? Well, it's a guessing game, and it's an economic guessing game. So one day I woke up and I was like, hold up, why are we moving all of that soil to the dump? Because that's where I read it was going. And I called my friend Susan and I said, could you help me? I want to see if we could move that landslide debris to where it can be useful, right? Where it could actually be a form of mutual aid. All along the LA River where there is brownfields, when it gets hot and dusty, there's real health issues for people and animals that have trouble breathing. So what if instead of moving this clean virgin forest soil to the dump, we moved it to the brownfields? It's already paid for, right? So it's just a form of a new way of thinking. She said, great idea. She's part of the first line of defense, so she knows that she can get through barriers. And we walked down and talked to Flow, love it, their name was Flow Engineers, feminist trucking company. Kristen is the name of the young woman in charge, and we told her what we wanted to do, and she said, well, this is actually a really helpful idea because we think we have 5,000 truckloads of landslide debris, and each truckload is going to cost $100 to take to the dump. That's $500,000 that we probably have underbid for because they have to pay to deliver. I said, well, what if I can find you someplace to lay it down for free? She said, well, then we'll bring it to you. But we need to know by Friday where it's going. And this is where long-term entrenched practices like Metabolic Studio can come in handy. Because right across from Metabolic Studio is the LA State Historic Park, which is a 32-acre brownfield or a place incapable of supporting much life. It used to be the most fertile floodplain in the networked basins of LA before colonization. It's Tongva Gabrielino Kitsch land, and the studio has been trying for 20 years to revitalize that land. It's today a park, but we're trying to go deeper into that by reintroducing the flow of the river into that park and bringing this landslide material to the first 4 acres to form a novel urban ecosystem of regenerated forest material. But because there is so much landslide debris right now, we thought, well, what if we could make a patchwork ecological network throughout the basins of LA, one parking spot at a time? What if we could pierce a parking spot every once in a while and bring in a landslide column, which you'll soon see will germinate all on its own. And by doing this, create a kind of eavesment for butterflies, bees, and pollinators to come and work with community to find out what's under their parking space so that we can actually cultivate the landslide debris to clean that ground up and start a mycorrhizal network even under the ground that will help clean up the city and form a citizen's utility so that we're not just waiting on our electeds to do everything for us, but we're leading the way by prototyping public art as a form of mutual aid. So this is our very first landslide column installation. Our intention is to do one a month. The next one will be going to Crenshaw Dairy Mart in Inglewood. The one after that at the Box in the Arts District. And so we're here to talk to you today because you might want to put your own together and become part of that network. So this teach-in today is for you to hear more about what this is and why we're doing this, and how it engages a new concept of public art as a form of mutual aid, both for government, but also for living systems, acknowledging that landslide debris is alive and shouldn't go to a dump, and that rainwater will activate it. These tanks will collect rainwater here from the roofs. The sound you're hearing keeps bacteria from forming in stored rainwater. It's biomimicry, so in nature, water cleans itself by moving. So if it's held in a tank, we keep it animated through speakers inside the system. 18th Street will be able to program the sound they want to hear. In here, we just started with a group of women in prayer in Sicily that I happened to record outside a church because I thought it sounded like the humming of bees, and it tends to bring in the birds and the bees, but it's actually the human voice.
My name is Maru Garcia. I'm a fellow at Metabolic Studio. I'm also an artist myself, and I'm very happy to be here with you talking about a topic that is very dear to my heart, which is soil. I've been working with soil for now a long time, and it's one of my sources of inspiration because of all the different things that soil means for us as humans. So soil is a source of life, soil gives us food, soil also captures carbon, soil is an ecosystem for other organisms. But when we talk about soil, we have to also recognize that there are different types of soil. So I want us to think now on the soil that we have in these columns, that is coming from a landslide, that is coming from the mountain. It's a very different soil that we can find, for example, if we unpave here, or that we have in our backyards, or in general in the city. So when we are talking about urban soils, what do you think is the main difference compared to the soil that comes from the mountain and other ecosystems? One thing that a lot of people in other teams have shared is like they see a difference, for example, in the soil that is very hard to work with, like can be very compacted, can be something like soil that it's even repelling water, so like the water doesn't stay, so it's very hard to garden there. And yeah, probably one of the main things that we can imagine is pollutants, contaminants, man-made substances. Right now, after the fires, we are learning about all these chemicals that have been released, and now they're unfortunately also contaminating our soils, other ecosystems in the ocean. I have my ocean friend here, and all these different places where we now live. So besides that, we have also legacy contaminants, and I'm sorry that I probably am the one that I'll be speaking of like dirty stuff and like the sad part of this, which is, yeah, legacy contaminants. I don't know if you remember, but like the gasoline that was used in the past before the 60s, it was gasoline that had lead on it. So it was now it's banned, but you can imagine all these cars running through the city just expelling these fumes. What will happen with all the lead that is in the gasoline? And we have petroleum industry, extraction of petroleum, processing and storage, leaks that happen after that, transporting all these materials, getting to the ground. Other types of industries. I've been working so far more than 40 years with this community in Southeast LA. There's a very industrial area there, but there was this company recycling more than 30 years car batteries. We have now lithium and lead batteries. So this company was recycling batteries, which if you think about recycling is a good thing. But if you don't do it properly, then happens what unfortunately is currently a situation, which this company was expelling this dust into the air, and this got into the ground, affecting more than 10,000 properties. So I've been working with this community, and a lot of the times they share with me that they feel guilty, for example, to allow their children to play in their backyards. How do they know that that was there, right? Like it's not their fault, but they feel disconnected with the soil. They feel that they even, for example, a lot of them are gardeners. They don't want to garden anymore. They don't want to eat what they garden because they don't trust the soil. They fear the soil. So I've been trying to see ways in which we can, humans, reconnect with the soil and remember that that soil, it's a soil source of life, as I started. And one way, it's through ways of healing the soil. And I've been researching a lot, and the studio has been also researching methods, natural methods for healing the soil through plants, for example. Some plants have the capacity to absorb lead through their roots or other contaminants. Mushrooms can break down contaminants coming from petroleum. I've been working a lot with minerals that have the capacity to encapsulate lead, for example. So there is ways in which we can start healing our own soils. And I want us to leave this space thinking that it's true. We are living in a situation where our urban conditions are not ideal, but we have to do something for ourselves and also for the rest of people that live around us. So besides healing the soil, I think it's also very important for us to heal our connection with soil. How can we see again soil as a source of life? And one way I like to do is to remember a story, a moment in which we felt this connection with soil.
We're going to talk about water and infrastructure. That's going to be our focus. Does everybody know what watershed we're in right now? So we're in the Santa Monica Bay watershed. Sometimes people call it Ballona Creek watershed. So this is the map. So we're basically right over here. So the watershed, does everybody know what a watershed is? So it's basically a area that is hydrologically connected by, there's the high points and all the water drains to a river typically, but also could be a different body of water. And so it's all connected. And when it rains in the mountains or at those high points, that rain brings down soil and silt and logs and all kinds of yummy, nutritious material for an ecological zone to kind of grow and thrive. And then every time it rains, it brings more material down to really revive that ecosystem. With colonization and urbanization and everything we've done in Los Angeles, you can see we've cut off a lot of those natural cycles of water and soil.
Yes.
So it's highly paved and pretty impervious at this point in time. In 1938, there was a massive flood in Los Angeles, and a lot of people and property were affected. And so the government and the Army Corps of Engineers came together and decided that the best thing to do to protect people and property was to concretize the rivers and move water as quickly as possible out of the city to these channels and out to the ocean. And so with that also came a whole infrastructure of underground pipes and drains. And so this is, all the white are the underground infrastructure of pipes, of which there's 1,300 miles of it. And the blue represents the rivers that are now mostly concrete channels. So it moves through the pipes to the rivers and out to the ocean, mostly untreated. 80% of the water that falls on the basin of Los Angeles goes to those storm drains, to the rivers and out to the ocean, which is pretty crazy when you think about how Los Angeles is always in a state of drought in one way or another. And so we're just throwing away this super precious natural resource. Does everyone know where their water comes from when you turn on the tap? So we're heavily reliant. This is an image from the DWP of where the water for Los Angeles comes from. So as you can see, 73% of that water comes from Northern California or the Colorado River. So we're not going to talk about energy in this circle, but it takes a lot of energy to move that water that far. And you'll notice this up here, 15% comes from the Owens Valley, from Owens Lake, and from the Eastern Sierras. And if you don't know the story behind Owens Lake, it's pretty dramatic. And we won't go into too much detail, but we sucked it dry for Los Angeles. But we sucked it dry. We created an environmental disaster up there. There's tons of dust from the dry lake bed, all of which DWP is still dealing with today to try and mitigate it, to prevent all the health hazards for the people around the city. I'm sorry, around the lake. And so, you know, given all this, that we're stealing water from other places to benefit Los Angeles, that we're always in a drought, that we're throwing this water away, the question is, what can we do, right? What can we do about it? And a lot of people talk about going back to nature and like, let's put it back the way it was, which obviously is not an option at this point in time. We've built up to the edges of all of these concrete channels, AKA rivers. And what we need to start thinking about is what we like to talk about at the studio is this idea of a cyborg watershed. We need to look at the reality of what we have, of what we've built up and what we've created, and start creating ways to adapt and to mitigate what we know is going to be more extreme weather events due to climate crisis and climate change. And so how do we really start addressing the situation? So a lot of people also like to talk about unpaving the Los Angeles River and really starting from there and moving outwards. Again, we don't have the space to do that. And part of the issue with the river is it was built on models that were in the 40s and 50s for flows of water, and these different infrastructures throughout the city were actually built on old models of information, which we've definitely blown past, and we know we will continue to blow past. So how do we start dealing with the situation we're in? And so, as you have seen in these two corners, the idea of potentially puncturing that shell of the city and creating these puncture holes, kind of a Swiss cheese throughout the city, to allow the water to sink back down into the soil, into the groundwater, and potentially down into the aquifer, to not just hold that water, but to create a sponge for our city to actually be able to live and thrive on its own. And so, what if we were able to take a parking lot out of a parking space out of every parking lot across the city to create this kind of network, ecological patchwork network that would not only help with the water, but would help with the planting, would help bring back pollinators and birds and create this microclimate in the city.
I'm Leigh Adams, and I am part of Farm Lab, and have been an artist in residence at the studio. And my joy in life is community. And out of community comes the most amazing things. There are 6 people in the United States who like teaching junior high, and you are with one of 6. So my junior high students come in and they're all insular. I have to do exactly what you're doing to be cool. And then we teach them to think outside the box. So when I say the box, the Roman grid. Okay, the Roman grid is spreadsheets, and it's our property lines, and it's the way our streets are lined up. It's right angles. So do all those right angles mean that the crazy wonky angles are wrong angles? No, it's a system that we inherited that we didn't vote for. And yet it absolutely defines our lives and constrains us and has us think in boxes and straight lines instead of flowing like water, flowing like wind, flowing, moving like birds move. So one of the things that happens when we come together in community is we perform actions that expand community. We think we're here today just to support these columns. Good, we can add seed, we can add water, but What we're not thinking about is that plant growing. And when that plant grows, we're not the ones who notice it. We may say, oh, look, my seed is growing. But the birds are noticing. The pollinators are noticing. The butterflies are seeing if that's a host plant for them or not. We are critically dependent upon pollinators for our food supply. If we don't have pollinators, we don't have food. And we are poisoning them at an unprecedented rate. So anything we can do to support a pollinator is a good thing. Well, so a pollinator might notice that seed growing. And when it blossoms, oh, butterflies are coming. They want some nectar. But those butterflies land on that plant, they drink from that blossom, and they lay their eggs on that leaf. When those little caterpillars hatch, they're eating that leaf. The birds notice. The birds come to eat those caterpillars. But they're not just taking away, they're bringing seed and feces that fertilize. So we will have not just seeds growing out of that column, we will have seeds that the birds are bringing in outside of that column. And a flourishing cascade of things are taking place. Those plants are bioremediating the soil that is underneath. Oh, this is good, it's permeable, right? This is the best we're doing now, is having permeable pavement. Except to get there, we graded it, we compacted it, we poisoned it, we put down plastic weed cloth. And that's there, the plastic that we pull out of the earth as oil, make into plastic, put it down. Under this is breaking down from the brick material, is breaking it down. It is turning breaking down and becoming micro. No, we just put down how many layers of plastic or poison in order to put down our prize-winning permeable driveway.
So you're not a fan?
I love permeable driveways over concrete, solid concrete. But that's what we want to look at. Lauren has always said another city is possible. So how do we get to another city? We have to reimagine everything. That's another thing that Lauren says, reimagine everything. As team members, we are encouraged to reimagine, to experiment, and it's not to come up with a specific outcome or product. It's to share what we come out, oh, that didn't work. Share that so nobody else has to go down that same road. Well, what we're sharing today is what has worked for us. We've taken up the pavement. We have brought in pristine soil that hasn't been poisoned, that hasn't been sprayed. And that soil will support native plants that support the pollinators that make our food possible, that support birds, that sing and bring in seed. And that's not just for us, that's for every single person that comes in here, isn't it? What about the people walking down the alley, walking their dogs? You think hearing bird song and seeing flowers and butterflies and green where there was lovely permeable pavement. It's layers and layers and layers. So what we think we're doing is a small contribution. What we're actually doing is a huge support of living systems that reach far beyond what any of us can imagine. Often people come to these events and they start talking to each other. They find out they live near one another. And then, oh, can we do this on the parkway? Could we do this in our front yards? Could we do this in that empty lot? Could we do this at the school near us? The school's growing vegetables. Hooray, good for them. They don't have pollinator plants. They often have low production because they don't have pollinator plants to pollinate those vegetables and fruit trees. I grow native plants all around my fruit trees. My fruit trees bloom, they're filled with bees. So I teach my students, the ones I love so dearly, to make seed balls, and that protects the seeds from birds and rodents until they grow and support the birds and the rodents. Those kids go home, and on their way home, they throw them into bank parking lots, any place that has water that is not supporting nature. It's non-native species that don't support anything here. They throw them into parkways. So in Pasadena, anywhere you go in springtime, there's wildflowers blooming in the corners of schools, in parkways, in bank parking lots. They don't know how the wildflowers got there, but the students do. And that joy, as well as life, continues expanding by each action we take, and it comes back to us 1,000-fold.
Great morning. My name is Milli Macen-Moore. I've been part of Metabolic Studio since 2009. I'm project managing Farm Lab, which is a division of Metabolic Studio alongside with the undeveloped. So today I'm here to teach you really about the culture of care. And what does that mean? Well, in that case, very similar to what I had mentioned, self-care, but also caring for other living systems. In this case, this is not dirt, what is in front of me. This is soil. The difference between dirt and soil is that dirt is inert, or has no life in it, no microbial life, no fungi, no hidden inert seed, and soil is alive. So I'm going to pass this dish, and it's okay if you don't want to touch it, but I do recommend you take just a very small handful and just have it in your hand for a few minutes. Go ahead and take a little handful. Close your eyes. Bring that handful of soil close to your nose and try to smell it. If it doesn't smell like anything, attempt to crush it a little bit between your hands or in your hand, and again, smell the earth. Imagine this earth beneath the oceans for millions and millions of years. The ocean begins to recede itself and develops these beautiful canyons in Topanga. This earth came from a landslide in Topanga. This earth has mycelium, bacteria, and dormant seed in it. I consider this earth very sacred to us, as it should be to you as well. Not many of us have touched this earth. Not many have interacted with this earth. Y'all are probably the first humans touching this earth. Put your both hands, hold the earth. Put some positive, loving frequency into the earth. Now imagine a little rain touching this earth. Imagine a seedling beginning to sprout and growing out of this earth. And now you see a little mushroom popping out of the earth. Now open your eyes and look at the earth. positive intentions are now in this earth. Now I'd love for you to get up and let's place the earth where it's going to live for the rest of its life. Scatter it, nice intentions, back to where it's going to live. Wish it well. I'm going to pass around this beautiful white sage that was actually born from seed and some other of our Topanga soil at Metabolic Studio. Breathe it in. It's highly medicinal. It's a California native. The Chumash, the Tongva, and the Quiche use it for ceremony alongside with tobacco. When I saw that seedling germinate out of this amazing soil, I was gleaming with joy because I was observing what this landslide was bringing forth into our community in East Los Angeles. From the Topanga Canyon to East Los Angeles, we began to see these amazing medicinal plants germinate alongside with mule fat, which is also a California native. And there's two plants here which are also California native. We have a laurel sumac, which doesn't want to separate from this beautiful morning glory, which is also a California native. Don't be confused by that invasive species that has a purple flower. So I'm going to keep this together. Please experience it, because all of these California native species grew out of this landslide soil. So what I'm trying to convince y'all is come back and observe this land, because in a month to 2 months, y'all will see a lot of green germinate out of this landslide without any intervention from any of us. The seed is asleep at the moment, and as y'all can see, this is a result of that beautiful landslide. Once these seeds germinate, they catalyze the microbial activity in the soil, which then catalyzes a mycelium network in the soil, which assists the plants in the root system to assist one another, to either feed one another, to give drink to one another, to even heal one another through the mycelium network. Hence the reason why this soil, to many of us that care for it, is sacred. This is why I would love to encourage y'all to come back. Even you saying hello to your little pinch of soil that you blessed this morning is significant to this soil. Your observation of the germination of the seed is significant to the soil.
Hi everyone, my name is Diego. I'm the biologist at Metabolic Studio. I want to talk about climate change, landslide soils, and how landslide soils can be used as a tool to help us achieve greater climate resilience. I'm going to start us off by first making sure that everyone understands the link between landslide events and climate change. Why would landslide events increase in frequency with more climate change? More extreme weather events. With climate change, most all of California is going to increase more drought that is more extreme and that is going to be longer in duration. And then whenever we do end up getting rain, we're going to get a lot of it at once. So with that in mind, why is that going to cause a landslide event from occurring? You sort of explained it, but there's some more mechanics to it.
Less root systems from plants?
Yeah. Our plants, our trees, our shrubs, all of the things that keep our soil structurally sound aren't going to be used to having less and less water for longer periods of time during the year. So what's going to happen? We're going to have what scientists call ecosystem dieback. Entire ecosystems are likely to collapse. So when you have less things that keep soils from being eroded away, whenever we do end up getting these big rain events, you're going to have a huge landslide event occurring. Fire. Same sort of mechanism. Wildfire, basically clear-cutting entire ecosystems. If we have a rain event shortly after that wildfire, before ecosystems could regenerate, you're going to have a landslide. In Southern California, climate change is actually not going to increase the risk of wildfires. The reason why is because Southern California largely is already at the max sort of risk of wildfires. So a couple more degrees of warming isn't going to make it more risky for us. We already at the worst case scenario for wildfires. In Northern California though, that is going to be more and more of a concern. Northern California is going to have more wildfires with more climate change because Northern California is more mild and temperate than Southern California is. So more dryness and more extreme temperatures in Northern California is going to cause more wildfires. So now that we have a mechanism and an understanding of the link between landslides and climate change, and assuming that we're going to have more landslide events occurring, how can we use landslide soils themselves to make us more climate resilient?
Other than these towers?
Other than these towers, although these towers are a good example, if you can think of how these towers are going to make this area more climate resilient, that's certainly a good way to think about it. We sequence the soil, we sequence the ribosomal RNA, which is a particular genetic marker that is the part of our DNA that is transcribed into proteins. In layman's terms, it means if we found RNA in that soil, it's from something that's alive and breathing and reproducing, right? So, and what we found was there are 450 novel species of bacteria, fungi, archaea, etc., that are found in this landslide soil itself that were not found in a large portion of our urban soils. So we didn't sequence LA River soil. What we sequenced to compare with this was soils that were found in brownfields, soils that were found in areas near freeways, or soils that were more representative of a broader cross-section of the city of Los Angeles. So because the LA River corridor is a very particular corridor, we didn't sequence that. What I'm thinking is happening is these are species that are found in a very healthy reference ecosystem in Topanga, right? Topanga is was one of the last parts of Los Angeles that had beautiful old-growth chaparral, coastal sage scrub, oak woodland, all these beautiful plant communities that should be all over the city of Los Angeles before we urbanized. What I think is happening is we find those there because that ecosystem's healthy, but we don't find them in the city of Los Angeles' urban areas because we've degraded those soils. Those species have died and have been lost. So if we move landslide soil from one healthy ecosystem to another, we could potentially reintroduce species that were lost and make our soils more resilient and more healthy. A wildfire in a given area is a huge disturbance to soil diversity. So if we want those species to recover after a wildfire, we could inoculate them with landslide soil to help regenerate all the diversity that should have been there in the first place. But why is that important? Why do we care about healthy soils with climate change? Look at me right now. Where am I? Where are we? We are surrounded by concrete and brick and all these impermeable surfaces that retain a lot of heat. And if you think about a big city, downtown Los Angeles gets a lot hotter during the summertime than it does in Santa Monica. What do we call that? Urban heat island effect, right? So if we want to green our cities to reduce the amount of heat that someone is experiencing, again, it starts with healthy soil. The other thing I want to point out that you're going to see in the next coming months here at 18th Street is We actually saw over 50 native species that were endemic to Topanga, where the landslide occurred, regenerate from the soil itself. The reason why is because chaparral, coastal sage grub, etc., their main adaptation to wildfire is they build a very strong seed bank in the soil itself. And whenever a wildfire does occur, all those seeds that have been stored over many years regenerate. So instead of throwing the soil away with all that beautiful bacteria, all that beautiful fungi that are vital to our ecosystems, and throwing all that beautiful seed that is going to regenerate from the soil itself, we can use it to help reintroduce cross-sections of what we would see in Topanga wherever we lay that soil. So you're going to see literally a slice of Topanga right here in this parking lot in the next coming months.